conversation, this session, this task force meeting for tonight. Just want to remind our task force members, we're in month 6 of this work. It may or may not feel like it. I'm not sure which way you fall on the spectrum of that, but just want to remind the community that's listening to us that we were charged, brought together to examine, to educate, and recommend in areas of public safety needs. Our job is to examine what are the needs, what could we be doing differently, what can we imagine for our community. So we are deep in the examination phase. Again, we're in month 6, which means that we have divided up into 4 roundtables that have been doing a lot of investigation, and we're just getting started. And we want to hear from you. For those who are not familiar with how to get in touch with us, it's very easy through email, communitysafety@durhamnc.gov. Pretty simple. And I am Xavier, one of the co-chairs. Pass it over to Marcia, our other co-chair.
Thank you. Good evening. Good to see you all. We always begin with a reflection on a value, and as we prepare for this wonderful town hall that will be this Friday and Saturday, I think of the value of empathy, because empathy includes acceptance and belonging and respect. And with that, I hope that we participate and come together for this really great event with that value, as well as tonight. So does everybody agree that empathy will hold the center of our time together? Thumbs up. Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I will pass it to Dwayne.
Hello, everyone. As we continue doing the work for Durham's residents, I want to speak on behalf of the chairs, Marcia and Xavier, in expressing their usual gratitude to each of the members of the task force. I know at this point, because it's routine for me to express gratitude for your services, it may sound like a cliche, but believe me, it is not a cliche. It is fully recognized that the work that is ahead of you is enormous. The work that you've taken on is a big deal. And we are hopeful that because of your effort, because of the time you've sacrificed to contribute to making all of Durham a safe space for all of Durham's residents, we have to make sure that we continuously express this gratitude. That being said, I want to also give a quick overview of the different roundtables work so far. I will not be going into detail because I know you will have your own 10 minutes and you'll be able to speak for yourselves. But I wanted to speak about the different experiences that I've had as one of the only members with James, who sits on all of the roundtables, and so we know all that is happening. I want to thank also the different ad hoc members of the roundtable. Whilst you're not officially part of the task force, your contribution is also invaluable. We thank community members who have been helping to connect us to different resources, human and otherwise, to ensure that we get the work done. 2 roundtables in particular, the Criminal Legal System Roundtable and the Violence Intervention De-Escalation Roundtable. You have used ad hoc members a lot, and we recognize that this is paying off in many respects. On the other side, we know the Skilled Crisis Care Roundtable and the SRO Roundtable have not yet used any ad hoc members, but you continue to do great work by the other 2 roundtables. We recognize too that the SRO Roundtable, you've been deep in your work. You've done your listening sessions with principals, planning listening sessions with DPS teachers, and I know have trained youth leaders to support the listening session that will continue with other students across DPS. I want to also recognize the criminal legal system for their work, especially in the listening sessions with survivors. We truly appreciate that. At this time, I also want to pause to say special thank you to Jatoia and Miss Muffin. You have so bravely lifted your identities to say you have had interaction with the justice system, and you've shared this interaction with the justice system to make sure that other people do not suffer the injustices that might have been meted out to you. So thank you for that. The Skilled Crisis Care Roundtable, a great weekend is coming up. Friday and Saturday, I know because I've been involved in all of these discussions that you've been working hard, and I hope that other task force members will disseminate the information and advertise or market Friday and Sunday's event, as well as to join the Skilled Crisis Care Group as they continue to listen to the voices of Durham's residents. The Violence Intervention and De-Escalation Roundtable has spoken a lot about the social determinants of health. And I know there's a lot of benefits that I look forward to, the benefits that will come from those discussions. I know that group has also included lots of different residents from the community, especially those afflicted with violence in recent time. So I thank you, and I especially thank the skilled chairing of one Mr. Samuel Scarborough. Thank you a lot. So I'm going to stop here and turn it back over to Xavier and Marcia. But what I want you to remember from everything that I've said is a big thank you. We are grateful. And in saying that, I want you to remember that gratitude is a must in this space. Thank you.
Thank you so much for shaping that, framing that in that way. We asked Dwayne to just kind of do an overview of just the general work that's happening, because in your 10 minutes each, we wanted you to really concentrate as much as possible on the two questions that we posed to you in the agenda. Put them in the chat. Also, question one, and this is, all roundtables, and this is not just a report, it's a discussion, a chance to talk to everyone who's here. First question, the first prompt is, are there any obstacles that you have encountered in your work as a roundtable that this task force or the greater community might be able to help you overcome? Any kind of walls or obstacles? And number two, does your roundtable have any additional announcements or updates that this task force or the greater community should be made aware of? So with that being said, you are officially prompted. If we could start with the Criminal Justice Roundtable.
That's process of elimination by tag, not it, that's me. As far as the obstacles, none. So far, we've not faced any resistance, quite the opposite, enthusiastic participation by the experts we've had discussions with in the roundtable and participants in our first set of listening sessions that I will mention when I talk about update on what we've done and what our short and midterm plans are for what we're going to do. The only challenge we've encountered that we've already mentioned before, which is probably common to a lot of the other roundtables, is the more we investigate, the more areas we find important to explore. For example, the need to expand our inquiry, which we're going to do into the civil court system, not merely the criminal legal system, namely family court, abuse, neglect, and dependency court. So we'll be examining those. And to Dwayne's earlier point, that good suggestion came from the participation of 3 local defense attorneys who've been meeting with us for almost all of our roundtable meetings. As far as our update on what we've done so far, we plan to do in our exploration of the criminal legal system from first arrest through first appearance in court, we've been focusing on places for more early intervention and diversion, either diversion pre-arrest or especially post-arrest diversion. We've met with the Director of Pre-Trial Services, Chief Magistrate Evans, the Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Resource Center. We've also had the first of 3 planned roundtables with CJRC staff. The first focused on diversion and specialty courts last Wednesday, mental health court, adult drug dependency court. The second, hopefully in a week or so, will focus on mental health, drug treatment, and other services that Criminal Justice Resource Center provides to justice-involved individuals both inside and outside of the jail. And the third will focus on reentry resources and possibilities. And in all of these, we are looking to map existing services, but especially delve into where areas for improvement and innovation are. We've also had 3 of a planned 4 listening sessions with family members of homicide victims hosted by Marion Bailey and the Religious Coalition for a Nonviolent Durham. Marion's also been a consistent participant in our roundtables and has brought a great deal to that. These were not open to the general public or other task force members for understandable reasons. We wanted to keep the kind of outside guests, as it were, limited. So that's why we didn't make much of an advertisement about that, but we'll certainly be using the results of those and sharing that with others as we move forward. We'll also want to have listening sessions with individuals who've been through the criminal legal system and also the family court and other systems, and or have served time in the county jail. And we have some leads on how to recruit such individuals, especially building on the experience, personal perspective, as Dwayne mentioned, that Muffin and Jatoia bring to our roundtable. Those listening sessions will be more open to the public and to interested task force members. Once we've examined more of the criminal court system, as I said, we'll turn to the civil court system. That will involve its own set of roundtables with experts and representatives of those courts, building on what we've been able to learn from our 3 defense attorney members, ad hoc members. We'll also set up listening sessions with individuals who've been through that court system from start to finish, as well as formerly incarcerated individuals, either folks who spent time in the Durham County Jail and have come back home, or folks who were in there and then probably also in state and federal prison and have come back home. We, along those lines, will also examine jail conditions and programs. That will involve roundtables with appropriate, perhaps jail staff, and certainly with criminal justice resource staff who work in the jail to provide many of those programs. And we've been trying to negotiate, and we'll continue to try to negotiate as much as possible, access to current detainees in the jail to get their perspective in whatever form. But as I mentioned, we won't be dependent or reliant upon that solely. We will be able to get the community voices of formerly incarcerated individuals and their family members, if not current detainees, in the form of listening sessions. And then finally, we'll turn to the reentry process. That will involve again, more roundtable discussions with appropriate jail staff, especially with Criminal Justice Resource Center staff, community organizations working to support reentry, and then again, listening sessions with formerly incarcerated individuals who have made use of those reentry resources or can give us the needed perspective on what needs to be there that isn't, either folks who were in the Durham County Jail and have returned home, or those who are in state and federal prison and have recently returned home to Durham. Other announcement along the lines of the very, very powerful listening sessions that Marcia and I have been honored to be part of with the family members of homicide victims. There is a vigil on October 23rd, hosted by, I believe, the Religious Coalition for Nonviolent Durham, to honor the, unfortunately, too many names to name, and victims who've fallen victim to homicide, gun violence in Durham and their family members. It'll be, I believe, 10 a.m., start at 10 a.m., Saturday, October 23rd. It's at 107 North Driver. Marcia, what's the name of the church again where it's hosting it?
Elizabeth Street United Methodist Church.
So it's basically, yeah, it's Elizabeth and Driver, I think, is the intersection. So if anybody has any questions about that wrap up, if not, we'll move on to the next roundtable.
Any questions? Mike, could you tell us the members of your roundtable?
Marcia and myself and Muffin and Jatoia. And then ad hoc members are Marion Bailey, whom I mentioned, Renee Shaw, who runs mental health services for the Criminal Justice Resource Center, has been a recent participant, and Marion Bailey I mentioned, and also local defense attorneys, very experienced local defense attorneys, Leslie Nidick, Jessica Flood, and Labria Stevens have attended almost all of our roundtables.
Thank
And
you.
we're certainly, eager to have other folks, interested individuals, experts join us as needed as well.
Appreciate that very comprehensive look at what you've been doing and where you're headed. It's a reminder also to all the roundtables as far as the work continues to kind of grow right in front of you. And this is just me talking off the top of my head, just something I've been thinking about as well. It may be necessary to even split up. That because you are looking at an entire system, to be honest. And it's something that you may want to talk about. Are there ways that you can divide the work as well? There's a lot that you've done and that you're talking about moving forward. It's October. We know what happens in November and December when holidays come in and interrupt schedules and vacations happen. So I admonish your roundtable and all of them to think about looking down the road for a few months and really trying to get a good timeline of what's realistic. We are volunteers. It's a lot of work. So I just want to put that out there. And really, thank you for sharing all of that.
And I should say, as I'm sure with all the roundtables, as we've been going, we haven't merely been mapping the system and finding problems, but we've been accumulating a good number of potential solutions, which of course will need to have detail in terms of budget and personnel and all those sorts of, but we'll be including those in our second quarterly report. There's a pretty growing list of, I think, practical, useful solutions, many of which don't involve lots and lots of more money, but better policy approaches and we're focused on ones that we know can be implemented at the county or city level that don't depend on the administrative office of the courts or a Superior Court judge or whatnot, things that we can accomplish at the county and city level.
And that's exactly the light at the end of the tunnel of this work. Once we finish up in another year or so, maybe. So that's what we all want to see when it's said and done. And that's why I was saying, we're just getting started. The recommendations part, for most of us, is going to be down the road. And there may be some things that really pop up for some of us are like, hey, we can make these recommendations right away. And just a reminder that we do have members of the elected bodies that put us together who are attending these meetings as well as liaisons. We want to welcome you as always, and thanks for being a part of this journey with us. We're going to move on to the school resource officer roundtable, please.
Peace, everybody. I think we haven't had too many setbacks. I think we were a little concerned at first about being allowed into the space. I think for all the parties involved, whether that be students, getting access to principals, access to teachers, and I think we've actually done a pretty good job of that. Jesse and Alec and others have held a principal session and are working on 2 teacher sessions in November. And then Nori and myself are working on 4 separate youth listening sessions, one at Durham School of the Arts, one at Hillside, and then 2 at Lakeview. So just really trying to pin down the dates at the moment. And, I think one thing that is still helpful is if folks were to push out the information about the youth listening sessions and letting whatever youth you may know about the youth listening sessions and know that they could, make $125. We have at least 4 more youth listening sessions where we can provide a stipend of $125 for youth to organize the youth listening session. And my email is actually listed on the screen, Whittenberg@advancementproject.org. And Jesse, Nori, y'all let me know if I missed something.
I'm seeing Manju, so I'll chime in after. Go for it, Manju. You have a question?
It was just a very quick question about whether you've received support from DPS in getting the word out to potential participants.
I believe it went out on the Durham Office of Youth listserv, but no, not to my knowledge. But I think, yes, that's hard to assess. I'll say that. that's difficult to assess. But we could be more intentional about requesting that assistance, to your point, I believe.
Have any other community groups or municipal bodies supported y'all in outreach?
No, it's kind of just, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in. I think we've done our best to work cooperatively and creatively, and given that we had a larger roundtable, initially having 5 people, we split up. And so Tyler and Nori have really focused more on working directly with youth as opposed to working with adults. And I think that's been one of the sort of points of opportunity and challenge, if you will. But feeling like those opportunities and challenges are worth facing, because it feels really important to work with youth and not sort of tokenize or speak on behalf of them in ways when they can speak for themselves. At the same time, Manju, I know with our listening session with principals, DPS was very helpful, I would say. We were able to get the word out to principals and engage with principals and assistant principals before the school year started, precisely because of superintendent, some of his staff, Lavinia Foster, I remember your name. Shout out to all the administrative assistants, because they be making things happen. They make sure people get paid. They make sure things happen on time and in an orderly fashion. I'm pretty sure I said this before, but also our appointee from the school board, trustee Lewis, has been really helpful as well. And even though she's no longer serving, goodness, Tanya had been really, really helpful as a former principal, and just having those relationships. And so I think we certainly honor her service, though she's no longer serving with us actively. And she's even been in touch and reached out a couple of times just to check in with me about just random thoughts and ideas that she's had. So I definitely think members of DPS are generally supportive of our process and engagement. But to Tyler's point, it is on us, I think, to make invitations and reach out and do our best to engage, recognizing that they already have a lot going on, and doing our best to work within that, and be intentional and creative in understanding. So I know with our educators listening sessions that we've just confirmed, it's actually 3, not 2, that we've made available for November. We're hopeful to re-engage some of those same networks and really be a bit more open. Working with principals, it was a pretty set number, so we didn't necessarily need to do a wider, wider promotional.
I think 4 is good too. So we have 4 youth sessions planned or in the works now, and then we look at how that went and can reassess, and then be more targeted after that too. Yeah. But I think we're at a good place. And the students, we have an 8th grader and a 9th grader, which is a beautiful thing too. But yeah. That's all. Sorry, Jess, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to throw that out there. I think we're actually at a solid place with 4, just to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add in terms of our listening sessions with educators at DPS, right now we've scheduled those for November 1st, November 22nd, and November 23rd, I believe. And we're in the process of getting that word out. So hopefully folks will hear and be able to register accordingly. So that's one of the big updates that I'd like to make sure comes out clearly, that we hope educators in DPS will participate as they're able for just 1 hour. I think we have set aside on my calendar 7 to 8. So hopefully that's an accommodating time. You know, maybe get a little break and not have to go right after work and have maybe some time to eat or do whatever you like to do in the evening. And so November 1st, November 22nd, and November 23rd. So we'll be pushing that out in the coming weeks and hope folks will participate. And like Tyler said, based on how those go, we'll kind of determine our next set of listening sessions. In terms of, I'm sorry.
No, I think we should just keep doing this. Like that's
Yes.
how you assess too. You know what I mean? Like even if we make recommendations, we implement the recommendations, then we should continue doing this so we can continue to assess how things are actually working. Not to say let's continue to analyze things for the sake of doing so. I'm saying let's do listening sessions, make recommendations, implement the recommendations, or those in power, hopefully will implement the recommendations, and then we can keep it going. I think this should be a regular process within the county, especially with students.
Are there any other questions?
I was just going to say one thing and then just wanted to check in with Nori in case we've missed anything. The one thing that I would add just more transparently is recognizing, and I think this is less of a like institutional obstacle. I think it's just more of a ever-present reality that like it's still a pandemic, it's still a lot going on. Don't know about you, but I've had people in my life pass away unexpectedly. Like it's been a lot of stuff. And figuring out how to have that level of like empathy, to use the word again, and emotional presence with folks, and just knowing how to hold space well, just in the process of, just getting this work done has been a lot. And so knowing when to slow down, knowing when to check in, so that no one is feeling burnt out, no one is feeling overworked, and folks are feeling more cared for, just so that we can continue doing this important work and operate as sustainably as possible. So I think that's just, I imagine everyone can relate and understand that the set of feelings and emotions and experiences that come with that. But it just feels important to name how the pandemic continues to exacerbate a lot of things. So, and wanting to be sensitive to that. So yeah, that's what I'll say. Nori, was there anything that you wanted to chime in and add? You're good, okay, cool. And Alec sends his best. He's not here tonight. But we're grateful for his contributions as well.
Any other questions for the School Resource Officer Roundtable? Yes, Councilmember Javier.
I just want to say that third date, and I put it in the chat, I think you might be hard pressed to find folks on the Tuesday at 7, especially school folks, because that's 3 days off. And I know that as a teacher that you're often very exhausted, or just school personnel right before holidays. So it may be the 22nd is probably fine, but that last date might be hard pressed to find folks who are participating or want to participate.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Definitely want to thank this group also for the hard work, especially centering the voices and experiences of youth, even giving a few youth actual opportunities to do the organizing, to bring their peers to the table. And that's what that stipend they mentioned before. And we'll move on to the violence interruption and de-escalation roundtable. Well, I'm sorry, the members of that roundtable actually were all named with Jesse, Alec, Tyler, and Rory. violence interruption, and de-escalation.
Sorry about that. I had some internet difficulties here at my dorm. But to begin, I'm going to pass the mic off quickly to Dr. Boone to kind of talk about some of the concepts that we have covered in some of our listening sessions and also some of our general meetings with the roundtable, to kind of give a glimpse into how we're trying to view violence in Durham and how we wish to address violence.
Thank you, fearless leader Samuel Scarborough. Appreciate you. So on our team, we have Ashley Kennedy, Randy Trice, Earl Chestnut, Regina Mays, and they've been instrumental in providing insight into some of the things that I'll mention. And so I think that social determinants of health that Dwayne mentioned is really something that we're focused on, as well as adverse experiences that are not only adverse childhood experiences, which have become a common phrase as of late, but they're adverse climate experiences that include COVID-19, adverse childhood experiences that's a little bit too much to go into too much detail about, but it has to do with trauma experienced during a childhood before someone's 18th birthday. The result of that can be severe physical, emotional, and behavioral health challenges. And one of those challenges does have to do with violence. And then adverse community experiences that we see in built communities that do not look like other communities in Durham. So it's not the people, it's the built community, it's the built environment. So those are adverse community experiences. And the last one is atrocious cultural experiences that have to do with racism and colonization and slavery and the impact of those things on our DNA, the DNA of Black and Brown people. And so in that context and looking at trauma, as we're talking about the trauma from COVID-19, we understand that children and adults are facing that trauma, and children can't do well alone. They need adults that are whole to care for them. And so we need a resilient community. So in the context of the social determinants of health, there are economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, community and social context, and healthcare system. So the idea is to fill those buckets with existing organizations that are doing the work in that space. Bringing together community organizations, and I do not believe that it's like herding cats. I think it's a matter of identifying the strengths and talents of abilities that have been doing work in these spaces for so long, and not intentionally are they siloed, but they become siloed because of whatever reason. So the idea is to create a pipeline through the social determinants of health to meet the needs of individuals in the community, but then not stop there. Identify community members who are in grassroots members and ambassadors, and pay them to be extensions of these organizations so that they can further reach into the known environments and people that they know and carry out some of those services. So that's what we've been talking about, and there's a lot more, but really a community resilience model in terms of what we can do now and also in terms of prevention. Thank you, Samuel. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, the community resilience framework is really what we're allowing to guide our work right now. And so far, we have focused on 2 programs that interrupt violence in Durham, Bull City United, which works primarily with adults, and Project Build, which works primarily with youth. And actually, we plan on holding a listening session with young people and Project Build in the coming weeks to help understand how the program has affected their personal lives and to also understand how violence has personally impacted young people throughout Durham. Because getting some of those anecdotal experiences provide some context to some of these issues that we just cannot get from looking at data alone. And also, we are seeking to have a greater understanding of how police data is being used to evaluate a public health crisis and whether the city's metrics for evaluation have been or are in the process of being gathered. And we will also like to know more about BCU's relationship, or Bolston United's relationship with their mental health provider, Upward Change. As we understand, uninsured residents in general have difficulty accessing timely mental health services, and we hope that BCU has overcome this obstacle. And obviously, this obstacle gets complicated with the pandemic we are currently living in. So those are some key areas we're looking to address at the moment. And also to follow up, we're also looking to conduct some more listening sessions with a group of violence interrupters from the Nation of Islam. I don't think they're actually affiliated with the organization, but they've shown a lot of interest in helping to work. And they've also led some efforts in the past to help work. We're also looking to conduct listening sessions with Project Rebound and Lakeview in the coming weeks, just to see how they've in fact impacted people on an individual level and also on a broader systematic level. That's basically all I can remember.
Thank you, Sammy. Any questions for this group?
Oh, also another update. We're still awaiting a data request from BCU. We're still waiting to see the results of that data. That's it.
Thank you. As I'm listening to your group and the others, I'm going back now to the comments that Jesse made about just doing this work within the pandemic amongst all the different challenges. I think back to what Dr. Campbell said about gratitude, and then what Marcia said about empathy. It all ties together. And I'm hoping that as you're listening to the other roundtables speak about their work, that you're hearing and experiencing some intersections in the things you're looking at too. Now, I do encourage you, Marcia and I encourage you to actually talk to each other, because there are definitely some intersections in the work that's going on between the groups. Where there are a lot of crises happening at the same time that we're living through. And so with that being said, let's look at crisis intervention. And thank you, Dr. Boone, for mentioning names of your roundtable. Okay, crisis intervention, 911. I think this group has more names than I can remember. Who's reporting out?
Jennifer is reporting back on our behalf, and the rest of us might chime in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have been planning for this event that's coming up on Friday and Saturday of this week, and that's taken up most of our planning. I think a lot of folks here are familiar with this, so I'll not give you the expanded version of it. But for anyone listening in from the public who is not aware, we are hosting a town hall Friday morning, Saturday morning, and afternoon this coming week. It is open to the public. It will be virtual. And there's a few exciting things that are happening. One is that we're offering a $25 stipend to the first 200 people who register. We still have a few left. But they won't last forever, so please register. And also on Friday, one of the things that we're able to do is welcome individuals from 3 other communities to discuss what's happening. We're having folks from the Support Team Assisted Response, or STAR program in Denver, Colorado, where they have, if memory serves me correctly, both emergency medical techs like EMTs and behavioral health clinicians doing rapid response for people in crisis. We are going to be talking to the Police Alternatives and Division Initiative in Atlanta, which is a really cool group that has, it's grassroots with a capital G, if there is such a thing, and has adapted their program over time based on community need and learning as they go. And then an extremely kind soul is meeting us from the San Francisco public health program, even though it's extremely early in the morning their time when we're meeting up together. And we're excited to have them because they're one of the few I think not only, but one of the very few groups in the country that has prioritized putting peer individuals on the team. So regardless of their actual training or qualification, valuing people who have lived experience of the type of crisis people might be going through, lived experience of the type of behavioral health or mental health services that we might encourage those folks to become a consumer of, or what have you. There will be live translation in Spanish, so we're hoping to improve access that way. And yeah, so I think the biggest challenges we've had this far is just our own ambition and trying to get everything done in time and making sure that all of our bases are covered. We have already distributed the flyers and the advertisements that Shannon and the Department of Community Safety and Wellness very kindly and skillfully put together for us. If folks know of anyone, any individual, any groups, any neighborhood organizations, church organizations, food pantries, like literally anyone who might be able to distribute that information to their constituents who might be able to join us, we would be very, very grateful for the help. And then once, my anticipation is that once this week is over and we're able to process all of the great information that we've collected from everyone, because even though there are some presentations from other groups, obviously, we're really, really hoping for people to just share a lot of their own perspectives and desires and personal experiences with us. We're hoping to gather a ton of community insight and community wisdom. Our goal is my anticipation is that once we have this and we're able to sort of process what we have learned and what knowledge we have gained, our Roundtable has talked about taking on other tasks like making some site visits to the emergency call center to actually gain a better understanding of what 911 operators are experiencing and do that kind of work on the ground to say, like, if we are proposing this or that particular adjustment to our services, how is it going to impact people who are already deeply involved in those services. And I welcome anyone else from the Roundtable. I think we have 100% attendance here. Anyone else from the Roundtable who wants to pipe up to say anything that I might have missed.
And who are the members of that roundtable?
It is myself, it is Shanise, Isak, and Manju.
I would just add that we've heard feedback that the city of Durham has shared the information about the Full City Crisis Response Town Hall on Friday and Saturday with supporters through social media, and wonder if the county and the Board of Education can please follow through on sharing it. And I know that our liaisons, Ms. Lewis and Ms. Burns are present. If y'all could please let us know what you need to be able to make sure that both the county and the Board of Education are helping us with outreach. Thank you.
I see Mike's hand.
Thanks, Xavier. I was just thinking your very appropriate comment about the overlap between the work we're doing, and just as an example for the criminal legal system roundtable, like we've been talking with these family members of homicide victims, and one of the key issues that come up is the initial encounter, when they're told that their loved one has died. So that's kind of part of crisis response that can be built into that. So it's something that's relevant to your roundtable and very relevant to ours, independent of the investigation of the crime, but just providing healing to those people in that immediate crisis. And to Sam's point about requesting information and data gathering, we just today, our roundtable, we were talking about the need to get a better handle on what happens when law enforcement shows up and doesn't file a charge or doesn't make any arrest, the statistics on that in terms of their referring anyone they encounter to needed services. We have some sense of that from the Criminal Justice Resource Center about when an arrest is made and that person is diverted before they are charged. There's pre-arrest, post-arrest diversion. But as Muffins often pointed out to us, law enforcement is the first encounter with the criminal legal system. So we were interested in finding out, and if you all come across it, statistic for the DPD and or the sheriff about what happens when a law enforcement shows up and doesn't make an arrest. Do they make any notification or any record of what their encounter is, and if they direct people in need of services to services? And if they don't, That seems another important part of crisis response, to have those people there knowing where to direct people, and then on the back end, making sure those services are there to accept and help the people when they need it, before they end up in the jail, before they end up before a magistrate, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would say one thing to that is one of the many things that we're hoping to learn from community members this coming weekend, and that we remain open to in terms of feedback and insight in perpetuity, is what we should be focusing on. I know that mental health and behavioral health crisis has received I almost don't even want to use the word a lot. It is starting to receive something like the attention that it deserves from the media and from public. But at the same time, we know that there are multiple types of jobs that first responders do, either as a direct response from a 911 or emergency call, or follow up from other emergencies, things like that. So one of the things that we do want to know is, what does the Durham community want us to be prioritizing if we are going to be putting together alternative programs, pilot programs, anything that changes the system? Should we be focusing on barking dogs? Should we be focusing on welfare checks and citizen assist? Should we be focusing on traffic stops? Should we be focusing on these moments where something really devastating has happened to a family and law enforcement is the one delivering the message? I think that is speaking for myself, and I think for the rest of the roundtable as well, like that is a question that we're not assuming the answer to, and are very, very interested in receiving guidance on from anyone in the community. Also, briefly, I wanted to mention, and thank you to Manju for reminding me of this, because my short-term memory has not been at its peak. It's been a long pandemic lately. Is we wanted to just bring to attention something that came across our radar recently, which is that the county, and this is just informational for folks, that the county proposed in its budget as part of its capital improvement plan. So this has technically been in the documents for a few months that are publicly available, the construction of a larger youth jail. And there is, based on my understanding, a lot of sort of overlapping discourses about why that is needed. It has to do with the anticipation of more people who fall under that youth category perhaps being incarcerated because of the change of the law around who can be tried as an adult, things like that. What we wanted to just highlight and announce for folks on this task force, as well as anyone listening, is that the understanding we have gained is that County Commissioner, and please someone correct me if I'm mistaken. I welcome that feedback. But our understanding is that the plan for constructing a larger youth jail, which expands the facility from, I think we're at 20 beds up to 35 or 40, is advancing because there has been little public comment for or against or in discussion. And our hypothesis is that perhaps they have not received a lot of public comment because the public is not largely aware of the fact that that is in the capital improvements plan. So we are, I think passing that along to other roundtables and other task force members to say, like, if you have input, I think it was Ryan from the Community Safety Department earlier today who I think shared his assessment that this falls squarely within the realm of something that this task force has been put together to advise on. So advise, I think, is our invitation to everyone who is here.
Thank you so much for that report and those updates. Any questions for the crisis intervention you want to take?
Just a comment to the end. Yes, I do think we should speak up about the expansion of the youth facility. The fact that $30 million could go into so much more that's preventative. That's not. I think what we know what doesn't work is locking up children and youth and criminalizing them for what is either age-appropriate behavior or simply a manifestation of, no, I take that back. Sometimes they're locked up for no reason. And then there's other times where it's a manifestation of something that could benefit from supports funded with that 30 million. So I just wanted to state that. And we we recently wrote a letter to the commission about it. And yeah, we would love other folks' support in being creative and bold and imaginative and thinking about what else we could do. What else can we do that's preventative and compassionate and nurturing and in the vein of where the county is currently headed. So.
May I ask which roundtable the new, the proposed new youth jails, under which roundtable's purview would it be?
Kind of seems to me that it would be the criminal legal system, since we're looking at the adult jail, and we also, so I think that would be a good place. If anybody else would like to speak to that from the criminal legal system.
Yeah, although to Xavier's early point, then we need help. We've already got an overflowing plate, and there's not many items on that plate we want to dump off. And we've already talked about the need to deal with, juvenile justice. So yeah, that thing very much something that we should take on, but we need help to do it. Maybe a splitter, separate roundtable, perhaps, for the SRO one. Who knows? Could evolve into that. It probably fits on our plate more better than anybody else's, but our plate's overflowing.
I'll volunteer to help out.
Yeah, and I would add, I think we're on this task force because we say yes to a lot of things, so we're all really busy. But insofar as it would be helpful to, I know there's lots of talent on the call now. We have Dr. Clemens and Dr. Campbell and Dr. Boone. But if there is support needed by way of navigating the literature, child development literature, criminal justice literature, and kind of mapping out what that says, that's something that I could help with pretty easily.
So on that point, Marcia and I as co-chairs, we need to kind of look at the whole picture of all that's going on. Today's reports were amazing. There was a lot said in a short amount of time. I would encourage anyone who likes this stuff, likes to talk about this stuff, to go back and look at this YouTube video when this is said and done. This is one of those you want to see again, not only for what we just heard, but also for what's to come as well. But I think we need to look at the distribution of all the work. And hats off to James or whoever is actually taking notes on this one, because there was a lot of information. The notes may say, hey, they reported. go watch the video. But we shall see how that looks. But I am going to kind of go back and just kind of analyze what all this being said, because that's a lot. And it may call for some collaboration between some roundtables in some way, 2 people from one from the other, whatever it takes. But we'll definitely look into that. Again, Marcia and I meet weekly with Dr. Campbell, and we try to look at all the big picture. That'll be one of the things we're looking at. So again, thanks to all the roundtables for that great discussion. We want to move on to our guest, who's not a guest because she's been with us since day one. And I will let Marcia introduce our presenter.
What an honor. It really is my pleasure to, welcome Dr. Ajane Clemens. When we first met, you were not a doctor, but boy, you got business done. I know, it's really great. And I have been waiting. She could not reveal this research until she had done lots of made lots of academic requirements. So now it is being released, and it is just, I can hardly wait to hear what that research brought. And I'm just so grateful that you are with us and that you're willing to share your knowledge. So thank you, Ajane.
All right. Well, thank you so much, co-chairs Owen and Cason, and to the members of the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force, and Dr. Campbell for inviting me to take part in today's public meeting. What an honor. Your mission is so critical. And I can think of nothing more important to borrow or to extend Dr. Campbell's points. I can think of nothing more important than the work that you all are doing as volunteers, that you have done and that you're continuing to do to serve your neighbors, collecting community input and to inform policymakers' decisions. So it's been an absolute joy and privilege to serve you and the task force. And though I've transitioned from Duke as a PhD student to my new role as an assistant professor of public policy at the University of Denver, I am certainly honored to be able to stay involved and hope that this will be the first of more conversations in which I can share with you what I've learned in my interviews with some of Durham's most heavily policed residents. So I'm going to take about 30 minutes to discuss my methods and a portion of what I found, as well as a few policy recommendations. And so I'll ask you to hold off on questions unless it's a quick clarifying point. And if we're coming up against time, I'm happy to stay. If you want to adjourn and continue Q&A, I'm happy to do that. Alrighty. So despite the fact that young Black men in economically distressed neighborhoods are killed more than any other group by civilians and police, neither the academic community nor policymakers know enough about what policed folks want, both to be safe and to feel safe. Nor is enough known about what police populations see as legitimate policing, if they do at all. In my interviews of Durham residents, I set out to understand how Black men living under siege make sense of policing, how they assess it, and their desired reforms. You as task force members embody how democratic governance should work. Not only were you appointed to represent Durham, you are holding public meetings and extra listening sessions day and night to better understand your constituencies, particularly folks who are the most impacted by public safety challenges. Now, let me pause right here and acknowledge the fact that this particular research project, my project, leaves groups out. For example, young Black men do not speak for young Black women, especially trans women who face unique and grave dangers. This is part of a larger project that compares young Black men in the US to young Muslim men of Bangladeshi descent in the UK. And my next research will focus on women and their needs. But I chose to focus on this demographic because in terms of the sheer numbers of those killed, Black men between the ages of 18 and 35 are the most at risk, and their odds of being killed exceed women 20-1. So my research questions are intentionally broad. The first is, how do civilians in heavily policed communities make sense of and assess police? And here I want to understand how they process what is happening to them and around them, the language they use to describe it, and the logic they use to make judgments about it. And number two, what policy preferences result from the criteria they use to assess police? And so here I want to take the information they gave me and convert it to as direct a set of policy guidelines as possible. I conducted 21 interviews averaging 2 hours and 11 minutes, which I suspended in March 2020 due to COVID. The interviews took place in a private room in a library. I asked 33 open-ended questions and concluded with a brief survey for a total of about 50 questions. And as a frame of reference, we're talking about 1,000 pages of interview transcript. So I focused my recruitment of the interviewees on this roughly 2 square mile area where the city and county of Durham carried out a multi-year initiative, very unfortunately named Bullseye. Here, the Durham Police Department attempted to crack down on high homicide and attempted homicide rates by dramatically increasing pedestrian and vehicle stops, often without probable cause. And so the community protest prompted leaders to officially suspend the program in 2011, but this area remains the most heavily policed in terms of both presence and contacts. The area is 90% Black and Hispanic and features Durham's highest poverty rates, ranging from about 44% to 56%. And as a frame of comparison, this is over twice Durham's African-American poverty rate, 3 times the city's poverty rate, and 4 times the US poverty rate. Now, to recruit, I went on foot everywhere where there was an establishment and posted flyers at places young Black men in the community would typically go. rec centers, libraries, restaurants, corner stores, cell phone shops, and of course, barber shops. I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of the sample. In terms of demographics, the average age was 24 and a half years old. The typical participant had a 12th grade education. 2/3 identified as Christian. 86% reported an occupation in the formal economy, so that's across private, public, and nonprofit sectors. The most often mentioned occupation being in construction at 29%. And a little over half had no children. About a quarter had one child, and the remaining quarter had 2 to 4 children. Now, in terms of how they were raised, their family composition, about 38% were raised by single moms. 62% were raised in full or part by their father and or stepfather with their mother, or as partly by their biological father as a single parent. Half of interviewees had an extended living arrangement at some point in their lives with grandparents, parents, friends, neighbors, and or foster care. And this is because of volatility that was due to parental drug addiction, premature death due to homicide and chronic disease, intimate partner violence, incarceration, sudden disability, eviction, and other socioeconomic struggle. The sample's diversity is also evident in its exposure to violence and encounters with the criminal justice system. Participants estimated they had had as few as 2 interactions with police and as many as 100. However, those at the highest end attributed that intense contact to their status as known drug dealers. 2/3 had been arrested at some point in their lives, though slightly more than half had ever been convicted of a crime. 71% had been a victim of a crime, and slightly over half had been a victim of a violent crime, such as being stabbed or robbed at gunpoint. Over 1/3 had been shot, so 38% had been shot at least once, and 57% had witnessed a stabbing, shooting, or murder. Gowan Brunson write that police in economically distressed, high crime neighborhoods have been shown to be more likely to profile minorities, use greater force, and commit serious misconduct. Researchers have found residents in these communities to be negatively disposed toward police. But the reality is, it's complicated. These 21 young Black men came from a physical area, roughly 2 square miles, but contain wide-ranging beliefs and hold deeply nuanced opinions. They see themselves as everyday men, the same as other Americans and human beings generally. Certainly, they note specific challenges of their surroundings, but they do not believe that their needs and wants, concerns, and aspirations are anything but normal, natural, and universal. To them, anyone would want a safe place to play and live, not overrun by gangs, child predators, murderers, and hardcore drug pushers. Anyone would want basic rights and liberties like being treated as innocent until proven guilty, or the latitude to walk the streets and gather with friends without being accosted by the government. Indeed, a right to life and well-being while interacting with government. I'm going to share a quote from Malik, who's 28, that captures this sense from participants that what they want is simple. And by the way, I've edited some quotes slightly for clarity and length, but I kept sensitive language because I want to preserve authenticity. So I am issuing that disclaimer now. Malik says, value-wise, you would think police would have some decent values. They probably got some values when they go home, but you don't get to switch your values on and off. You treat people how you want to be treated. They don't treat people the way they want to be treated. Just simple stuff our grandparents taught us, or our parents or uncles. It's so simple. You know, this ain't back in the cowboy days where you shoot a person for stealing a cow or a horse or something. You already coming out in your mind what you want it to be. You want something to happen. You would think their values would be top notch. The findings I'm going to share tonight focus on participants' criteria for judging how well police are doing protecting and serving them. So you would think of this question as, how do people judge police? And I'm going to begin with 2 questions that capture participants' feelings or their general orientation toward police and how those feelings have changed over time. So I characterize their assessments as positive or negative or mixed. A positive assessment reveals a great deal of trust in police officers, both in their actions as reasonable and appropriate decisions that serve the greater good, and in their intentions to do good. Joseph, who is 20, is the only one who has a positive assessment. His trust was established at a young age, and only reinforced by multiple positive interactions thereafter with both on-duty and off-duty officers. He acknowledges one negative interaction when recounting his experiences, but he dismisses this as an individual officer, kind of leaving his favorable assessment of officers as a whole intact. And Joseph also notes more than once that having 2 family members as police officers positively biased him. On the other end of the spectrum, deep distrust marks negative assessments. Participants attribute their distrust to various sources: unjust killings, lazy enforcement effort while serious crime rages about, harassment, verbal and physical abuse, and rapid devolvement of encounters into deadly situations. Fear of being harmed and or humiliated fuels anger, resentment, and avoidance of officers. Now, 76% or 16 of 21 participants hold a mixed assessment of police. The mixed assessments contain ambivalent language in which negative and positive emotions or characterizations of officers are present. For instance, participants might explicitly note the existence of good officers alongside concerns about the danger officers may present or their perceived failures to protect the community from violence. In contrast to negative and positive assessments, mixed assessments are much more likely to show change over time. 3 participants' assessments worsened as they became increasingly concerned about the risk of officer violence or witnessed it firsthand. Interestingly, 4 assessments improved as multiple positive experiences with officers led them to update their beliefs. So I'm going to share a few examples of participants with a mixed assessment orientation. And while Marcus's mixed assessment remains stable, Malachi's brightens and Malcolm's takes a dark turn. So the first is Marcus delivering a stinging critique, as well as praise toward officers, but his point really is that they're both human beings. I wish police would treat people like human beings. Don't just be looking at me like just because I'm Black and I got dreads, you just assume I'm a criminal and I'm just out here being a menace to society. I'm a human being just like you. You shouldn't have no right to feel threatened by me. I should have no right to feel threatened by you. You got some cops who really want to make a difference, but cops that are out here to make a difference aren't noticed. There's so many cops out here that's corrupt with power. They lose themselves and forget who they are, where they come from. Malachi revealed how his feelings changed over time. I try to stay off their radar. I had plenty of cases with police officers pointing guns at me. I don't like police officers. When I was young, I never liked the police. We used to throw rocks at the police. Everybody used to hate the police. I've changed because I've come across some good police officers. Finally, there's Malcolm, among the most sympathetic toward police. His first experience with police at 5 years old cemented his view of them in largely positive terms when they rescued him and his mother from a violent boyfriend, right after he had doused them both with gasoline, and just before he lit the match. Nevertheless, even Malcolm cannot avoid anxiety in his rare encounters. If I were to get pulled over and show my license, I shouldn't have to feel like, if I get this question wrong, I don't know what's going to happen. Being in a police officer's shoes, I would feel the same way as far as feeling uneasy. But you shouldn't have to feel that way every single time, because police protect and serve. If I get pulled over, my unease is an automatic feeling. And now that I have a son, there's just even more precaution. I want to see him go to college and get married. That's really important. And when he gets of age to get his car, hopefully things calm down by then. But he'd probably feel the same way. What is perhaps most striking about these accounts is the fear that undergirds them all. It is not a question of whether police are all good or all bad, or even mostly good or mostly bad. What infuses each counter with anxiety is the uncertainty each new officer presents. Which kind of officer will I get this time? Will something simple go off the rails? The inability to rely on a service that claims to protect and serve is something that troubles the participants, yet every positive encounter leaves a mark, years and sometimes decades later. The rest of the findings are going to focus on answers to 3 interview questions that gauge how participants assess or judge police. I ask how police could increase their confidence, what police would have to do in order to earn an A, and what a perfect police interaction would look like if they had a magic wand. Participants' responses to the 3 assessment questions contained a total of 148 preferences and recommendations, which I call comments. So I've provided 2 types of ranking for the themes. The top here ranks the themes by how many times this particular theme is mentioned out of the 148 total comments. And then the bottom shows the percentage of participants who mentioned the themes. So you can see there that it goes from 52% to 81% of participants mentioning a particular theme. So for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to go by the top. And you can see stop harming and threatening us and be part of the community, tied for number 1. And protect us from criminal threats, coming in 2nd place. In 3rd is mediate and problem solve. And 4th is do what's right, which is really about expectations of lawfulness and fairness. So in a second, I'm going to share a few examples from the top 3 themes. But first, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at what I find in their answers to these three interview questions. What these men are trying to achieve with these 5 themes, their aim is to increase policing predictability. They have a 2-pronged strategy. First, there are many outcomes when you're interacting with a police officer, many possible outcomes. They're trying to cut off the far range of the possible negative outcomes, right? And the second strategy is to try to smooth out individual officer decision-making so that it is not arbitrary, or at least doesn't seem arbitrary, but rather that there is a logical connection between the actions and reactions, right? So this call for predictable, reliable police service is something they believe their white counterparts already enjoy and believe that they are entitled to as their birthright. Unsurprising to anyone in this meeting, theme number 1 was stop harming and threatening us. This is largely driven by demands for officers to stop or minimize deadly force, which participants expressed are natural consequences of their other top concerns under this category: widespread harassment, an excessively aggressive approach, and bias against Black people. Given the number of times so many participants had experienced officers approaching them with hands on their guns, unprovoked in their estimation, and the number of times officers had pointed guns at them unnecessarily, participants felt those habits then created the conditions that increase the risk of shootings across the board. Here are 2 examples of when participants combine their deadly force and bias concerns. Nathan, minimizing the use of deadly force, and as a minority, making sure that I know I'm having the same rights as a non-minority. And Travis, they could stop shooting Black men for one, and I just think that race should not be an issue when it comes to officers. The law should see no color. The concern about deadly force also comes up in participants' responses to the magic wand question, with them using it to undo deaths and excessive force. Carlos, I would restart all those scenes where guys are wrongly harassed or attacked or brutalized. Hit the reset button. A lot of those people still deserve to be here. And just some more compassion and understanding for people, for humans, not just their own, but everyone. Here's Tommy, who carries so many deaths in his head. He uses his magic wand to rewind them all. Just rewind everyone back. Bring everybody's life back. Like the guy who was selling CDs out of his trunk. I'd have the officer talk to the man first instead of just putting him in a chokehold. The guy who was selling loose squares outside the store, I'd reverse all that back and have the police do it different, in a positive way. That's what the magic wand would do. Instead of coming out with your gun, I'd have him, excuse me, sir, you know you can't sell CDs. This says no soliciting or whatever outside the store. Instead of the guy who got shot in the back for running, instead of the gun, get a taser. All 4 of these quotes exemplify the fact that 19 of 21 participants identified with African Americans shown in the media killed by police officers. And for several, a similar fate is not distant. I did not ask participants these questions specifically, but in the course of our conversations, 29% shared an incident in which an officer pointed a gun at them, 43% told a story in which an officer injured them, and 38% brought up the fact that an officer had killed someone with whom they had a personal relationship, a family member, friend, or classmate. Had I asked each one, I'm sure we would see a rise in most or all of these numbers. These concerns about excessive force, bias, and the potential for deadly force, combined with officer unpredictability, make each encounter fraught. And that unpredictability or unreliability among officers was what underlay so much of the anxiety and their posture towards officers. Theme number 2, be part of the community, includes calls for officers to be courteous and to try harder to show that they care about the community. Derek used his magic wand to guarantee a polite, albeit routine interaction. Just a routine traffic stop. Ask me how I'm doing. Tell me what is the reason why you pulled me over. See if I had any warrants or any outstanding unpaid parking tickets. If not, just give me back my information and tell me to have a good day. This theme also calls on officers to become more invested and involved in the community through events and more positive exchanges with young people. Jay advocated a dramatic scaling up of such events when asked what police could do to increase his confidence in them. Do more things in the community, like they do that National Night Out thing. They do it one time a year. Just because you come out on that one day and everything is cool on that one day, y'all could have kept that. There's 365 days in a year, so we're supposed to kudos for that? No, hell no. Anthony also endorsed increased involvement in response to how police could earn an A. Being in the community, looking out, taking part in the community. Be out there talking and spending time with the kids, making sure the kids good, making sure they're straight, they had good days at school, instead of trying to judge them off their parents. Of course, not everyone wanted more police engagement. A couple of participants felt officers should only respond when called, adopting a more minimalist approach they had observed in more white neighborhoods. However, several stressed the importance of officers getting out of their cars as a first step to removing both literal and figurative barriers, with others insisting that officers could do much more to build relationships and guide people, especially youth. So here's how Elijah answered the question of what police would have to do in order to earn an A from him. My main thing is the younger people and the older people. I would say if they protect them, I'll give them an A. The younger, the kids. That's the ones that need it right now, you know? There's a whole generation coming right behind me, so they're gonna need guidance. Because right now it's some, but it's not enough. And how Travis used his magic wand. Say a young kid was to shoplift. Instead of a police officer sending them to jail, I would like to see a police officer drop some gems on them. Instead of them just punishing them out the gate, give them a chance, but show them the way. Give them guidance. These comments should not be mistaken for a desire for community policing. They are talking about the full force of officers serving neighborhoods, not a handful of PR-friendly officers holding meetings with elderly regulars while the rest carry on as usual. Under the third theme, protect us from criminal threats, top answers were to catch real criminals, solve crime, and stop, lower, or prevent crime. Malachi vented his frustration at police for not catching real criminals as he answered how police could earn an A. Doing their job, lowering the shootings, out here catching these mass murderers. Be out there. After someone dies, y'all want to be out patrolling the whole block. If y'all would have been out there, nobody would have died. Malcolm emphasized the importance of good investigative work when asked how police could earn an A. Winner if you don't see repeat offenders constantly. It shows they've done a good job of investigating. Also, being able to diffuse certain situations without excessive force. Anything that doesn't result in someone losing their life, that's the best job you can do. In this last slide on theme 3, we see examples of participants wanting police to stop crime. Both of them place priority on homicide. J, they're just supposed to do their jobs, stopping crimes, murders, and keeping peace. not damn pulling up, harassing people for no reason. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's not what taxpayers pay your salary for. And Jordan, I can't say, goddamn, stop the killing. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. I can't say, goddamn, just stop the killing. Stop niggas from dying and stop shooting us. Under this theme, grief, encouragement, and wariness accompany indignation at the crime situation in their neighborhoods. Their feedback for what would improve safety spans critiques of patrolling strategies, reallocation of enforcement resources, positive reinforcement for situations that do actually result in de-escalation, disappointment about poor service delivery in light of expectations of citizenship, and a reminder of the policing mission's core objectives. Again, what they are trying to achieve in their calls for police to stop harming and killing them, to be part of the community, and to protect them from criminal threats is predictability, reliability. In particular, they are trying to prevent the most extreme negative outcomes from occurring, as well as setting the parameters for rational interactions. I make a total of 25 policy recommendations based on all of the findings. My goal is to create guidelines for aligning the department's recruitment, hiring, training, commendations, promotions, and disciplinary processes with the participants' assessment criteria. And I also ask them about their desired officer attributes, so personality traits, behaviors, and values, as well as their suggestions for building trust. And the purpose of these recommendations is to really, like I said, forge a tighter connection between participants' expectations of officers and the outcomes they are getting. So here's just a quick summary of their policy targets. 1, hiring policies that select more even-tempered, less biased officers with a record of problem solving and service. Clear departmental standards that promote the value of human life and dignity and emphasize service and community partnership. 3, training that equips officers to manage their own emotions and safely resolve disputes. 4, accountability that ensures departmental integrity, including imposing penalties on officers, better communication with community members, and apologies to the community when appropriate. And 5, enhancing criminal investigations for homicide and attempted homicide especially, as well as follow up with victims and witnesses. Now, I want to lift up 3 specific policy recommendations that I believe are more unique or push farther than other policies that I've seen in various police departments. So 1, participants shared many instances in which officers proactively touched or drew their weapons prior to assessing a situation, such as when they were approaching a car window or as soon as they pulled up to an establishment. I recommend departments place limits on touching, unholstering, and pointing weapons through policy, training, mandated reporting, and audits of body cam footage. So the recommendation here reads, departments should clarify and limit behaviors regarding touching, unholstering, and pointing weapons through policy and subsequent training. Mandate officers file reports for unholstering and pointing their weapons and implement an automatic review by the supervisor. There should also be an independent audit process in which an official either higher than the officer supervisor or outside of the chain of command reviews body cam footage of the incident. 2, participants tended to view officers as grossly underutilized as moral authorities and positive role models, and called for a radical increase in non-enforcement activities and opportunities for officers to interact. So this recommendation reads, all officers assigned to patrol this district should spend 1 shift per week fulfilling a community service need. In accordance with the officer's passion and/or skill set, a coordinator would liaise between officers, community organizations, and community members to arrange the match. And 3, though some municipal and state laws conceive of officers as having literal rights to their jobs, like kind of like property rights to their jobs, I'm arguing that they don't have a right to dictate where they work. So I intend to develop this policy idea with attorneys who specialize in police unions and city charters and kind of other rules that set forth officers' rights and govern how officers must be treated, which literally vary from city to city. But the recommendation reads, officers should be reassigned from communities that have requested their removal. Though officers might have a right to their job under the law, or though there may be insufficient evidence in certain cases to sustain a complaint, communities should not have officers they deem harmful and dangerous imposed upon them by the state. The department should create a mechanism that would allow communities to have officers removed from their area. I'm going to end with two quotes that capture how these men want you, their representatives, to represent them. They reason that what is not covered by their rights as American citizens should be covered by their rights as human beings. In their exasperation with police, we hear a call for predictable, reliable service, something they believe, again, their white counterparts enjoy, and that they are entitled to as their birthright. In the problems and solutions they enumerate throughout their interviews, what we see emerge is their blueprint for quality control. Here's Anthony, 22 years old. I'd make the United States more of a democracy, for real. Because we're not. We're not really a democracy. We really ain't got as much say-so as people think, honestly. People don't notice it. We just think we do because they show us the bad in other countries and we think we got more freedom because they don't show the good. It's just like when they show us overseas, they don't show the bad over here and they don't show, they show the good over here and they don't show the bad over here. You see what I'm saying? Make us more of a democracy because we're not. That's just the title we got, but we're not a democracy though. And here's Joseph, 20 years old. I would tell politicians to more so hear the letter, not the law of what's being said, and to try to understand people's feelings, not just what they're saying. What comes out of their mouth is ultimately influenced by how they feel. So if you can understand how someone feels, then you're more so to meet their expectations, not just do what they tell you to do. To say it in other words, when you understand how someone feels, you're more so not necessarily to make the same mistake again. If they understand how we feel when they're reading the analysis and not just see what we're saying, but see in what we are saying, like how we feel, it would help them to make better decisions about how to accommodate what we're saying. These Black men surrounded by poverty and violence are making constant calculations about risk. In noting the breadth of possible outcomes and arbitrariness in daily decision-making by some officers, they largely find the current levels of unpredictability among police to be unacceptable. Their proposed reforms lop off the worst scenario outcomes and even out the logic of interactions to fashion an institution that is predictable. They believe themselves to be owed reliable institutions because of their identity as Americans and as human beings, though they convey serious doubts about their government contract, that social contract. Participants believe that the contract should exist. And the fact that these men spend 2 hours explaining how to strengthen that social contract shows that they still hold out hope. And that should give us hope in turn. Thank you. Looking forward to answering any questions or hearing any comments that you have.
Thank you so much. That was extremely moving and informative and motivating. So, any questions or comments?
Ajani, thank you so very much. That was very heart-wrenching, profound, impactful, everything. You're doing very important work for the community, and you're doing very important work for me as a Black man and for my son. And I found that very emotional, and I want to say thank you. I want to ask a question that Angie, a member of the public, has asked here. What was your intended sample size before COVID?
Thank you. 25 to 30 was the target. I feel very confident in the sample that I ultimately got, however. I mean, the goal and with qualitative research is really to hit what's called saturation. And that's when you're hearing the same or similar things over and over again, and you're not really like learning new things. And so that can hit as early as 15 interviews, frankly, depending on Jennifer's saying 3. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it can if you're doing a good job of getting you know, I don't want to say represented because that's going into quant, but if you're doing a good job of selecting, you know, from your community, then you should be hearing similar things, but also having a sort of diversity of perspective. And so with this, you're getting that diversity of background. You see, they're not all the same. They had a huge range in terms of their exposure to violence, family composition, interactions with the criminal justice system, and yet, so you're getting that diversity within your group, but you're also getting that overlap or that sort of homogeneity within some of the responses that they're giving. And then these themes are very, very strong. You see, you know, as much as 80% of participants mentioning some of the same things.
Okay, and then Tyler has a question.
I have a comment. I'm gonna be one of those people that comment and not ask a question. Is that okay?
More than welcome. Thank you, Tyler.
All right. I think what I believe we're here to do is to imagine what exists without policing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get to that space, and what is needed to get to that space? And I see this as, how do you police better? And then not only that, but then how do you think about policing? How do people think about policing? And how can we change that? But like, I think that I think overlooks the impact that the history has.
Mm-hmm.
It's just knowing what I know about the history of policing, especially in the South. Yeah, like I don't want to think how they can do it better. I want to think about what we need to do to be in a space where we don't need that, or that is not. Yeah, I'm gonna go with need. Because it is safe. Safety is clearly a major issue. Safety and wellness, right? And what do we need to do to create a state of wellness where people feel safe and are safe, and where we also hold each other accountable, you know, when major things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's I'll get off my soapbox, but yeah, appreciate you speaking.
Thank you. I would like to respond. I completely appreciate that point of view, and I don't actually see this as preempting or I don't see this in conflict with what you're talking about. I think that it's complementary because we're not going to get to a point where there's 0 police officers. So then the question is how it's very much an open question as to whether there will be like right-sized. They can shrink. The department can certainly shrink. It could be so certainly there's movement in that direction, right? But for the officers that remain, once that department is kind of right-sized, for the department that remains, then the community should have a full stake and have power and be able to say what that department should look like and how it should function and what it's going to take for that department to be effective. So yeah, I mean, certainly there should be this conversation, these investigations and recommendations about, you know, the size of the force, and what we are, you know, what people are counting on officers to do that they have no business doing. What are the deep investments that need to be made in human capital and infrastructure to prevent, you know, to enhance wellness, to position people so that they are, you know, having opportunities, to not inflict violence on them, right? To not exclude them from the community or from, you know, access to opportunities. So to stop the harm that we are doing right now to folks who are marginalized, but also to provide those opportunities, you know, for wellness. And at the same time, for that police department that's remaining there, how does that need to be reformed, retooled in order to actually meet the community's needs that are saying that they want them there? So, the second piece of this is that I think it's important for the grassroots organizers, for activists, for folks to have a sense of what they are, I don't want to say what they're up against, but if you have the folks who are most directly impacted by this telling you that they want police officers there in order to be safe and feel safe, like that's not something that's a good idea to ignore. That means that that there's going to be a sort of narrative, that there's going to be a sort of work to be done on the ground and outreach and all kinds of stuff in order to negotiate those stances, right? So I don't want to, I would be doing a disservice to you if I didn't tell you what they're asking for, right? These are very, very strong themes that are emerging from folks who have been shot, sometimes more than once, because they got caught in crossfire, right? This is not abstract. This is folks who, have had to bury many, many friends and family. And so they're talking from firsthand experience. And so it's my job, as an academic, to share that and share it in full.
Thank you. And then Jennifer, Mike, and then Andrea.
Thanks. I'll be brief. So first of all, thank you so much for this work. I'm really, I can't overstate my gratitude for this kind of insight that you're bringing. And I think this is a conversation that I want to continue having. But as I'm listening to you, my brain won't stop going about this question of, as we are gaining from our community an image of how they imagine the police department that they deserve, this question of, can the police department we have become that? And I say that not in reference to anything specific about Durham police at all, but just what we know about behavior change in police departments. Like the fact that in Portland, Oregon, every single officer is CIT trained, and yet people who display mental crisis are more likely to be viewed as violently resisting. There was a study done by Amy Watson in Chicago where a huge chunk of the Chicago police were put through, what did she call it? Procedural justice training, like how to be fair and be like, I think mirroring a lot of things that your participants were describing. And they did find a decrease in use of force incidents, but it was like 6%, like extremely modest, right? It's like, those are the numbers when I'm like talking to school principals about anti-drug programs. I'm like, the best ones we have will keep like 10 of your seniors from smoking cigarettes, right? Like they work, but they don't like work, right? And this study that we did when I was at the CDC, where we surveyed 2,800 patrol officers across 20 states about overdose response. And like we found that officers held a variety of views about drug use, about addiction, and some of them were just bananas. And then some of them I'm like, should we just give them an MSW? So I mean, this huge wide range. And we found that those opinions had zero association with anything that they chose to do on the scene, right? And so when I hear suggestions like, let's have them interact with the community more, like I believe, so first of all, if a community member will gain something from it, that's enough reason for me to do it, right? Like if the community member wants it. But I also I want to ask, like, will the officer who might truly gain something as an individual person from that interaction have the opportunity or have the capacity, even within their institution, to change their behavior in the field, right? Like will the things that are suggested as triggers of change actually trigger the change that people want? And I apologize for more of a comment than a question. I don't know. Like I said, it's ongoing. If you want to respond to that, I like your brain a lot, and I would love to hear what you think about it. I'm also happy to cede to other folks who wanted to respond to this, but thank you. More than anything, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I mean, just so much food for thought there. And I mean, first of all, let me say that I was surprised, at some of this, but again, it's like, oh, okay. I have to capture it. And the questions get the questions probe in such a way as to go from more sort of practical things to really no bounds. Like they use magic wands, right, to spell out what they want, what they desire. But it's important that I wanted to know what their sort of remedies are, or what their desires are, what their policy preferences are without those boundaries, so that you know what their ideal is, right? And having that pressure to dramatically change the size of a department and what it looks like, then kind of creates some opportunities then to reconstitute the officers and their tasks, their scope, and their activities. So I think, both movements actually work together. Like the size, the funding, or the size, or sort of how you reallocate the dollars to invest in health and wellness and infrastructure and support systems and things like that, like how that part, as well as what that police force should look like, actually work together, because you have the pressure coming from both sides in order to make any sort of change. I guess I'll stop there. I'll stop there, unless there's anything burning that you wanted me to particularly respond to.
No, I like that a lot. Thank you. I'm still thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, and thank you so much. And of course, I think what struck me was not what folks are focusing on your proposed policy solutions to the back end, but the voice you're allowing these young men to have, what they imagine in practical and grand terms, and not exactly no one, but few people have asked them that. So I think that's such a valuable part. So I hope you will find the opportunity to share this with, or and with the support of the city council, insist that these voices be shared with the incoming police chief and be part of what new police officers, and the same thing with the sheriff and part of their academy, that not just the policy solutions part, but that allowing these young men to relay their perspectives. This is their perception on what cops are, and police can say, well, you don't understand us, and that doesn't matter. Their perceptions matter, and they need to be listened to. And so I think that's really, really valuable. I hope in the short term, you've got to know these young men, and if you think they would be willing to participate with us in other venues to share their stories and be part, please do recruit them to come to our listening sessions and share those stories. I've always thought I understood it, but somewhat unfortunate that you can stretch our bylaws pretty far, but we don't come anywhere near examining the internal dynamics of the DPD and especially the sheriff's office. We don't have an opportunity to opine on hiring, training, accountability, any of that. I think we could push for it, talk about a brand new roundtable towards the end of our process that we could perhaps push for, and maybe adopt Dr. Clemens's report and its recommendations almost as its own. But I think at the very least, I hope not today, but towards the end, we can come back to, which I do think as a task force we have the purview to do, to recommend pretty strongly that the DPD and the sheriff's office need to institute real community advisory boards, permanent ones, real citizen review boards with real opportunities for real voice for the community, and especially those most affected by it, to have their voices heard and listened to by the police and by the sheriff.
Thank you, Mike. Wonderful points. And I just also want to be clear that I think, what they're asking for is completely reasonable, and there's a lot that can be done. And I'll take a look at the bylaw again for the nth time to just see opportunities for the scope and how these things can fit in from the beginning to the end, from that recruitment and hiring and training, the policy setting, the training, well,
let's stretch it as far as it'll go. And if we get told we've stretched too far, oh well, but we can try.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the point. It's that you have to have the right composition. Also, the internal consistency, making sure that the policy is clear. that the training matches the policy. And that, and to Jennifer's earlier point, I mean, a lot of training is really bad. It doesn't even come close to the realistic, scenarios that these officers encounter. And so that can be pushed, so that officers actually feel what they would feel in those situations, or something very close to it, that it's much more of a simulation. And so they're learning how to manage those emotions, the anxiety, the fear, pride, all kinds of things, masculinity, issues that come up. So that's another thing. And then, who gets promoted? How are they commending folks? And some of that cultural piece, and who's advancing. So all of that has to be internally consistent, and you don't have a chance if you're disjointed, on those things.
Ms. Muffin?
Thank you. Dr. Clemens, I want to start off first by saying thank you. You actually get it. One of my comrades, he always said that those closest to the problem are closest to the solutions, but furthest away from the resources. And so with you getting these young men to tell you exactly what they would like to see, I'm all for defunding the police. But until we get to that point, we know that we can't train away racism, and we know that we can't train away the hatred that some officers have in their hearts for Black people when they come into contact. And that was one of the main reasons why they became the police, is because they had that hatred for Black folks. But until we get to that point where we don't need them, we do need better officers. We do need a better relationship with those officers in order to reimagine the communities that we want to see and we want to have. So thank you for putting it into layman's terms for anyone who isn't in the academia world to be able to understand that out of the mouths of babes, and if we can't listen to our children, who are our future, who we will have to pass that baton to, and if we can't pass them a baton that is solid, they'll still be protesting in the streets like we're doing in 2021, and that should not be the case. So again, I want to say thank you for getting it, grasping it, and putting it in a nice little package for folks who don't get to feel it and know it, because I appreciate everyone's perspective, but if you've never been in your car and had to pull off into a store because you saw those lights behind you and you were in fear, or you've never had to have that conversation with your son on don't wear your hoodie because they won't see that you have your AirPods in, and if they give you a directive and you don't respond, they will shoot you, saying that you were being uncooperative. If you haven't had to have those conversations with your children, especially young Black men, and I'm raising a young Black man, you can't say that we want X, Y, and Z. Until we can get to defund the police, which defund the police doesn't mean that we won't have them. It means that we won't have them in the capacity where they are over policing my neighborhood. But until we get to that point, I want my son to be safe. I want his friends to be safe. I want any young Black man in Durham or anywhere else in this country to be safe. When they see those police cars, they don't have to be in fear. When they see those police cars, they don't have to worry. My biggest fear is my son getting his driver's license. My son is 16 and he's 6'3", 300 pounds. They don't know that he's a sweet young man who doesn't have a violent bone in his body. When they look at him, they see fear, and the fear comes from the color of his skin. And until you can recognize that, I don't want young Black people to have to put their pain on display for folks to say, oh, we can do this just because we want to make ourselves feel better. It it can never be about what I want. It has to be about what the next generation wants, because they're the ones that are going to be here when we're long gone. We may not never get to see defund the police. We may never get to see that. But if my kids or my grandkids or my grandkids get to see that, we have to start somewhere. And if we can start by using what Dr. Clemens has given us as a tool, we're carpenters right now, and we're building this community from the ground up. And what Dr. Clemens has given us today is another nail to put in that roof, or to put into that foundation, to make sure that it's going to be solid. So we have to use what she's given us to our benefit, and not try to tear it down and say this is not what we need, because it ain't what we need. It's what the people who live in McDuffie need. It's what the elders who live in J.J. Henderson need. The ones who want to be safe. If you can't look at Miss Liverpool and say to her, oh, I can make sure that you're safe when you go to the grocery store, then how can you look at her and tell her, oh, we don't need more police? I had to stop saying that, because I had to realize what I want is not keeping my community safe. It's not making them feel safer. It's not making kids feel safer about going outside to the bus stop and they have people doing drive-by shootings. So what I want don't make them feel safe. If they're telling us what will make them feel safe, who are we not to listen? Who are we to say, oh, that doesn't matter, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to make sure that our communities are safe, that our elders are safe, that our children are safe, and that our loved ones are safe. And until we can do what they asked us to do, then we really shouldn't even be here, because we're not listening to the community when they tell us what they want. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, I'm sorry.
Please don't be sorry. Thank you so much, Miss Muffin. Yeah, I don't think there's anything I can add to that, so I'll just let that be. Thank you.
And then Jess will be our last person, and then we turn it over to Marcia in the interest of time.
Thanks, Dwayne, and thanks, Doctor. You did a great job, and I'm, again, just grateful for the ways in which you've amplified voices that are often excluded and silenced, and we need to hear them, and you're helping us hear them. I think I just want to echo briefly what I felt I was hearing from Tyler. Mm-hmm. And it's challenging as we continue doing these listening sessions. I want to affirm and acknowledge when I hear people saying we want police. And I'm understanding our assignment with this task force as one that is focused on prevention and intervention, community-based prevention and intervention as alternatives to policing. And I recognize the ways in which we can talk about better police, or we can talk about better sheriffs, we can talk but those committees and commissions already exist. And I don't want to stop imagining before I even start imagining. And I'm continuing to push myself to lean into radical imagination that builds the kind of world that Muffin is talking about, where it may not be, us, it may be our children, it may be our grandchildren, it may be generations ahead. But to imagine a Durham beyond policing, right? Like, imagine that world. And so even in validating the real concerns and experiences of folks who say we want police, I think beyond our listening sessions, I'm really curious about the cultural work that takes place to understand, well, when you say you want police, what do you want them to do? Or what is lacking? And I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but I also want to, again, remember the assignment that we have, and that is very much to explore alternatives to policing in the criminal legal system. And I will always remain grateful for the ways in which folks are working diligently to better understand the current systems that exist, and to name the ways in which they could be improved or reformed or revised. And I want to continue inviting us to like be radically imaginative, because that is our assignment. And whether or not it feels realistic isn't the point in my mind, right? Like, because there are steps that we will inevitably need to take, that it won't happen today, it won't happen tomorrow, it may not happen in 10, 20 years. But we want to think about, well, what would it take to get there? And I'm just grateful for, again, the ways in which you're amplifying voices that are often not heard. And just want to echo what I've been hearing from fellow members on the task force. And just grateful again for the ways in which we're continuing to show up, months into this process. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your work and your presence here with us.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I just want to affirm that, and clarify that I see this as complementing what you all are doing. But yes, to be clear, there's not nearly enough work being done to imagine beyond it, beyond public safety. And so absolutely that should be, continue to be the focus. I do think it is powerful for you all to be able to have, firsthand knowledge from the community of what they want, and how that directly feeds into policy recommendations for what can be changed, because those things are certainly possible. And so, for you to be able to go beyond that is great, and I fully support your charge. And see this as only something that kind of, adds to that, that you have that knowledge of how how people's policy preferences directly feed into, or excuse me, how what they want directly feeds into potential policy recommendations. So probably I've spoken too much, but basically, thank you, and yes, and I completely appreciate and agree with what you've said.
What a powerful meeting. And I too want to thank you again, Janae. And I would, adjourning tonight, I would just like to say, to have a radical imagination, to create a city where we feel peace, which is what every person truly seeks. That comes from core values that everything, that is our true purpose. It is not to determine what law has been broken, but is our core values being expressed in our relationships, because peace exists in relationships, in right relationships. And in leaving, I would just like to ask everyone to share what value brings them, liberates their radical imagination. And with that, I will say the value that I bring is humility. And I will pass it to Jesse.
I think in this moment, what is helping me lean into radical imagination is what's helping me lean into radical imagination, if I'm hearing you well, is just hope because we deserve better. I'll say that. And then I will pass it to Manju.
Thanks so much. I think what's gonna help me lean into the practical implementation of our radical imaginations is this upcoming town hall. I want to make one last plug to anyone who's listening. Sign up at bit.ly/Bull City Town Hall, and please let's each one reach one. Share it with your organization, workplace, school, institution, neighborhood association, house of faith, friend circle, and trust. If you can't make it Friday, Saturday, or some portion thereof, it'll be available online afterwards. And this is just the first of many spaces of this kind. And I'll pass it to, thank you for your grace in allowing me to exceed my time so much. Passing it on to Jatoia.
I would say my sons and our community. And I'll pass it to Dwayne.
Courage, the courage for us to change the many things we can change, even though many of these things we don't believe we can change. I'm passing it over to Dr. Boone.
I was gonna say courage, but I'll say faith, and I'll pass it to Samuel.
I'm going to follow a similar theme to Jesse. I'm going to say hope for my generation and for those that follow. I'll pass it to Isaac.
For me, the value I'm taking, especially after the powerful presentation, Dr. Clemens, thank you so much. And looking forward to this town hall, is the value of attentiveness, to listen deeply to where people are coming from and what people want. And I will pass it to Tyler.
I want to say vulnerability. And I will pass it to Muffin. Or Jennifer.
What's helping me now, I would say patience, and especially the patience of everyone else on the roundtable that I work with and the task force that we're all on. Patience that is required to listen, to voice disagreement, to educate, to be present, even though we're all overbooked and forget things and are scattered and are doing our best. I am very, very grateful for all of that that's being offered. And I will pass to Xavier.
I'm also going to get on the hopefulness train, thinking about my children, grandchildren, and I'll pass it up to Mike.
I'll say humanity and those human voices. Nothing brings it home like hearing from those young men from the homicide victims' families. If DAs, if judges, if cops, if sheriffs listened to saw the face of the people they're dealing with and saw them as humans, not just statistics, we'd be better off. Muffin?
I'm gonna say I'm gonna bring radicalism, because I'm just not gonna conform to whatever any box that anybody want to put me in. I'm gonna bust out that motherfucker and keep it pushing. And I will pass it to Wanda.
You meant to say James, Miss Muffin.
Oh, well, I'll pass it to James.
So they're very similar. But I think what I would say is love for the community, and typically love for those who don't receive it equally from everybody. So I'm gonna pass it over to Isak. Or wait, no, Isak, you already went. Who hasn't gone? Dr. Clemens?
Thank you, James. So that's similar to mine. I was thinking shared humanity, that connection that I feel to folks' humanity, and it urges me to stubbornly, persistently listen and continue to do so. Councilwoman Caballero.
Grace. Thank you for this evening. It was very powerful.
Truly. Thank you all. And see you soon. Good night.
Thank you so much.